In the summer of 1980, Bob Gale was visiting his parents' house in St. Louis. Searching through the basement for some old things, he stumbled upon his father's high school yearbook. From the yearbook, Bob discovered that his father had been class president. He thought to himself that the class president in his high school was not someone he wanted anything to do with. This led him to wonder, was my dad one of those guys? Those school spirit kind of rah-rah types that I could not stand? Would I have been friends with my dad if he were in my high school? That was the initial idea for Back to the Future. There are at least 16 Back to the Future video games created since the original film released back in 1985. We will look at each of them and explore ancillary content and trivia around the films. We will be looking at these games out of order, but give dates where appropriate. Special attention will be given to Back to the Future the game, as it serves as a pseudo-sequel to the trilogy, even involving series writer Bob Gale. We'll even talk about a Back to the Future game by the Fall guys and gals. Well, sort of, but more on that in a bit. For now, let's go back. Back to the Future! The first set of games we'll look at is the earliest. Published to coincide with the first film, Back to the Future was released on popular European micro-PCs including the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, and Amstrad CPC. What you're seeing now is the Commodore 64 release. The game was developed by Software Images and published by Electric Dream Software, a UK-based game publisher established by Activision in the same year of 1985. The Spectrum version of the game was released on a bundle tape known as Now 4 Games, along with a game starring British comic book hero Dan Dare. The same year, a version of Back to the Future was released on the MSX. It's a run and jump game, for lack of a better term, where you avoid police and stomp on bullies to help George and Lorraine to the dance. The following year, Back to the Future was released on the MSX2, this time as an interactive comic of sorts, where you make choices to proceed through the game. At least that's what I assume. The game is in Japanese. Both games were released by a Japanese company called Pony Canyon, who published video games on many platforms between 1988 and 2003. The company is still in existence today, but seems to focus solely on music and video content. Getting back to the movie, once in development, the script for the first film took about a year to write. Originally, the DeLorean was not part of the script. The time machine first started as a time chamber, constructed out of an old refrigerator.
This warrants an investigation.
I'm so delighted that you've agreed to help out and become our executive producer. I do hope they told you exactly what you're getting into.
Things happen fast in this business. There I was, directing my own episode of Murder, She Wrote. Ready? And... action!
Before we get to the good part, kindly take a second and subscribe to the channel. Because of our last video, we grew from around 100 subscribers to around 250. I really want this growth to continue, and I'm hoping you will help. Back to the Future the game by Telltale Games is probably the closest we'll ever get to a fourth film. Bob Gale, who you now know as the writer of the film series, consulted on the story for the game. Regular series actors approved their likeness for use in the game. Christopher Lloyd even lent his voice to Doc in the game. AJ Locascio took over the voice of Marty, as Michael J. Fox had aged out of the role. Fox did voice several characters for the game, including a future version of Marty. The game was released in 5 parts and was available on PlayStation 3, Wii, PC, iOS, and later PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. The re-release on PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, and Xbox One includes redone voice work by Tom Wilson for Biff Tannen, as he was not able to participate in the original release. Several ideas by Robert Zemeckis made it into the setting of the game, including traveling to the Prohibition era of the 1920s and exploring Doc Brown's lineage. According to Telltale Games, keeping to the film's established timeline in so as to not create a time paradox proved challenging. While the game does pick up after Part 3, it is not considered canon by Bob Gale. That didn't stop YouTubers from editing the video into an hours-long movie though. After you watch this video, do a quick YouTube search for Back to the Future the game, the movie, and you'll see what I mean. Or just stay here and watch the Jurassic Park episode. In the game, Marty's room features posters for Weird Science, Frankenstein, and Miami Vice, all period appropriate of course. In an alternative 1986, George owns a console called the Nemotech MPX-125, which is obviously an Easter egg in reference to the MSX, sporting a similar design in addition to the name. Concept artist Ryan Johnson, no not that one, from Telltale Games designed the look of Marty and Doc for the game. He also provided art for the Tales of Monkey Island and Wallace and Gromit games from Telltale Games. Johnson cited Sam & Max creator Steve Purcell as a major influence on his art style. Another inspiration Johnson drew from was that of Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series. Looking at the concept art for Doc and Marty, you can almost imagine them as Clone Wars characters. Bob Gale mentioned that his favorite part of the game is seeing and working with young Doc Brown. Before release of the 5th episode of the Back to the Future game, design director Dave Grossman hinted at the possibility of a 6th episode. It's also hinted at in the final episode of the game, as the end frame states, "to be continued." Of course, this episode has yet to materialize. To promote the release of the Back to the Future game, there was a free Facebook Flash game called Back to the Future Blitz Through Time, which apparently had gameplay similar to Bejeweled Blitz. The game has been offline since 2012. More interesting than the game's content is that the game was created by Mediatonic, which these days is known as the developers of Fall Guys. The game would have been created within 5 years of the founding of the studio. It's hard to say if any of the actual Fall Guy developers worked on the game, since credits for the online Flash game have not been documented. Another game, Back to the Future, was published for the NES by the notorious publisher LJN in 1989. Even Mr. Gale called it one of the worst games ever, urging fans not to purchase the game. Apparently Bob had tried to offer LJN suggestions to improve the game, but according to him those suggestions went unused. The game is played from an overhead view, where you run around as Marty collecting clocks. There are also 3 bonus rounds too. In the first, you throw sodas at oncoming bullies as they approach Marty at the counter, no doubt to give him a good pummeling. The second bonus stage takes place in the school, and you catch hearts, I guess? From Lorraine? I don't quite get it if I'm honest. And the third recreates one of the most memorable scenes from the movie, where Marty rocks out at the school dance, catching notes to score points just like he did in the film. Yeah. The game ends with a driving level featuring the DeLorean trying to get to 88 miles an hour to get back to the future. Back to the Future 2 and 3 for the NES is a platformer made by the same team that made the original game, Beam Software, and also published by LJN. Remember Einstein, Doc Brown's dog in 1985? He was portrayed by a dog named Tiger. Tiger, however, didn't do all his own stunts. Some of the long shots of Einstein in vehicles were done by stuntmen in dog suits. Tiger only plays Einstein in the first film, as by the time of the filming of the second and third part, Tiger had retired. Einstein was played by Freddy in the later 2 films and the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios, Florida. The Sega Master System shares a game called Back to the Future Part 2 with the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. Obviously there are differences between each system, but the game structure and levels are largely the same. The game mixes genres, featuring 2 platforming stages, 2 puzzle stages, and 2 beat-em-up stages. The game was published by Imageworks, a popular European publisher who mostly focused on European micro-PCs. The sequel to the Imageworks game was released for the Sega Genesis, Master System, Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, MS-DOS, and ZX Spectrum, obviously titled Back to the Future Part 3. As has become a trend, there are a number of different gameplay modes in this game. First, a side-scrolling auto runner controlling Doc Brown as he races to save Clara Clayton, a target shooting stage with Marty, a stage where Marty takes on Buford and his men with Pi, and finally the player takes control of Marty as he makes his way on the train trying to get to 88 miles per hour. Probably one of the coolest games in this collection. Sadly, Super Back to the Future Part 2 was only available in Japan on the Super Famicom. It's a shame too, as it might be the best retro Back to the Future game of all. The game was scored by Hitoshi Sakimoto, who is best known for scoring Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII, both of which take place in the same fictional universe, which is unusual for Final Fantasy games. Wait, I should probably stay on topic. The game was developed by Dafco, a little-known developer that mostly worked on Japanese-only games, but is perhaps best known in the West for the boxing game series Fighting Illusion, which mainly has entries on the PlayStation 1. It's a bit of a minor mystery why this game was created at all. It covers Back to the Future Part 2 and was released 3 years after the film and even after the third film. There is no Super Back to the Future Part 1 or Super Back to the Future Part 3. Strange. In an interview with Club Metaverse's Mark Fernandez, Bob Gale mentioned that Back to the Future was one of the easiest pitches to the studio of any film he's been a part of. Frank Price of Columbia Pictures was a fan of Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale because of their previous film Used Cars. Universal Studio Theme Park Adventures for GameCube includes a section based on Back to the Future. In the section, Woody Woodpecker directs you to jump aboard the DeLorean to chase down Biff, who is in another DeLorean. You chase after Biff flying in your car, trying to bash into Biff to deplete his DeLorean's health meter. Speaking of the ride, let's go ahead and take a second to talk about the Back to the Future ride proper. The ride serves as a sequel to the third movie. As with the simulator, the story involves chasing Biff Tannen through time. Originally, the ride was intended to be a roller coaster, but it was later developed into a virtual ride inspired by Star Wars Star Tours. Steven Spielberg consulted on the project. The ride ran from 1991 to 2007, when it was replaced by the Simpsons ride. The Simpsons ride paid tribute by having Christopher Lloyd voice a satirical version of Doc Brown in a video seen by attendees as they are ushered onto the ride. Because The Simpsons are now owned by Disney, there is some speculation that The Simpsons ride will be retired and replaced by a ride at Disney theme parks. This would leave the spot formerly held by the Back to the Future ride vacant again, leaving some to speculate with the resurgence of popularity of Back to the Future that the ride may return. It seems unlikely, but it could happen, perhaps. In 1990, a Back to the Future pinball machine was created by Data East. Here's some footage of that pinball machine being played. Pinball FX3 is a pinball video game made by Zen Studios. A pack of 3 Back to the Future boards was released in 2017. The boards don't feature any music or sound samples from the films, likely due to licensing issues, but they at least look the part. Talking directly about the film one last time, originally the climax of the film involved powering the refrigerator time machine using a nuclear test detonation in the deserts of Nevada. Planet Coaster is a roller coaster and theme park simulator released in 2016. It's the spiritual successor to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. The game includes some paid DLC in the form of 3 time machine variants from the films. LEGO Dimensions, a game which followed the Toys to Life trend of the 2010s, released a Back to the Future character pack in 2015. Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd reprise their roles as their iconic characters for the pack.
It's difficult to describe the way that the twisting of the
What better than an analytical exegetical dissection of blood-curdling, nail-biting, heart-pounding, scary stuff than from this guy?
Which Back to the Future game is your favorite? Do you know of any we missed? I believe we got them all. We're trying to reach 100,000 subscribers. You can help by subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and liking the video. In return, we promise to make more videos just like this. This has been a Game Fact Special.